Dear Premier League, UEFA, FIFA, Sky Sports, BT Sports, and whoever else this may concern, this should have been the wake-up call that you all needed for some time. Football was on the verge of a monumental and insane change, a way that was going to have a seismic impact on the way we know football of today. It was set to be ripped away from the fans, the heart and the soul of every club, the most important part of football. Without them, you have nothing but a product that's not being watched. And over the years, you have all played your role in contributing to even the possibility of this happening, whether you knew it or not, and some obviously played a bigger part than others. For years, you have taken every single fan for granted in your own ways, and have done so for monetary gain. And when a bigger party with deeper pockets full of money came along and offered these teams an insane and very lucrative deal to break away, form their own league and take away football from the fans, they snapped their hand off initially and took a large portion of it from you, as well as taking it from the fans, of course. You all then went on to put forth your own selfish agendas, your own selfish views that masqueraded as views of support for fans, when in reality it reeked of absolute hypocrisy. Let's begin with talking about you, Sky Sports. Whilst it's been great to listen to the likes of Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville voice their opinions on TV, an opinion which basically echoed the opinions of near enough every single football fan in the country, you couldn't take the moral high ground in this. You've been rinsing fans for years. You even attempted a £14.95 pay-per-view model at the beginning of this season. A ludicrous idea, given how fans were not allowed into stadiums. Some people were having to self-isolate for a number of reasons. Many people were classed as key workers, and many people were struggling with mental health, and so many were badly hit in financial ways too. BT Sport was also a part of this. They are not innocent themselves either. Whilst both Neville and Carragher admitted that their opinions may come across as a little hypocritical, they still attempted to use their platform and status for good in some ways, but also in some ways it seemed that they were looking out for their own self-interest along with the interests of Sky Sports. Don't ever take the fans for granted again. Twice this season, you've almost lost us. You may think that football will have no other home on TV than Sky or BT, but as we were close to finding out, that may not be completely true. But in this scenario, you aren't the biggest issue here. You are part of the problem, but not the biggest issue here. Another part of the issue was the Premier League. Of course it was. They were happy when the money was all going in their direction. Allowing the millionaires and billionaires into this league and then acting surprised when suddenly they turned on them was a completely ridiculous move. They panicked when they saw their top 6 assets of the league were about to break away, and I hope the structure of ownership gets the shake-up that it desperately needs, and that we can follow up something like the German model of 50+1, where the fans own over half the club, to stop something like this from happening in the near future. And let's face it, if anyone should know about this type of situation happening, it should be the Premier League, right? It's come full circle. What goes around almost came around for them, as it did 30 years ago. Next, we move on to FIFA, the giant football governing body that came out and stated its disapproval of a closed European breakaway league and spoke about principles of solidarity, inclusivity, integrity, and equitable financial redistribution. Yep, the same organisation that gave a World Cup, arguably the biggest sporting spectacle in the world, to a country like Qatar. In what was a clear, fixed and very dodgy vote, FIFA awarded the 2022 World Cup, next year's World Cup, to Qatar. A World Cup which next year will disrupt a season, will be played in a country with a lot of issues. It will be the weather issue, it will be more importantly the human rights issue, of course, and has reportedly had a number of deaths whilst work is being done in preparation for the tournament. I'm all for equal opportunities and argue that bringing football to all nations should definitely be a thing that happens within these kind of big sporting events. I understand that. But when there's clearly human rights issues at the country set to host a major sporting tournament, and you sit there and argue that greedy, selfish businessmen are not following the aforementioned principles, when you clearly didn't follow them yourself on this decision, taking this incident isolated aside, on this decision, you did not follow them yourself with everything that's currently going on and in and around the country itself right now, in the build-up to the biggest sporting spectacle, the World Cup, is a complete joke. Oh, and you also extended the Club World Cup for that little bit of extra money as well. And finally, we come on to UEFA. You got extremely lucky in this situation. Just because you're the lesser of two evils in this scenario doesn't mean everybody is completely behind you. Change still needs to happen within UEFA and within the competitions that you oversee. You put in a financial fair play system that you didn't follow through on and have failed to uphold on a couple of occasions now at least. Mainly against PSG and most recently and more famously against Manchester City at the end of last year, in which your incompetence shined through and arguably was a big part of why these billionaires lost faith and confidence in you. You've recently extended the Champions League. More teams and more games, clearly not for competition, but again for monetary gain, because the extra games will generate and rake in even more money. You got to think of ticket costs, travel costs, and obviously everything that goes along with that in and around the games itself. You claim to care about the fans when in reality this clearly isn't true. You constantly gave a small portion of tickets to fans of clubs to make it into the European finals, whether it be the Champions League or the Europa League. Fans of the two teams that make it that far get a minority of the ticket sales. For example, in 2019, Liverpool played Tottenham in the Champions League final at the Metropolitano in Spain, a stadium that hosted 68,000 seat stadium, and you gave both clubs just over 16,000 tickets. Near enough the same time, Arsenal played Chelsea in Baku in the Europa League final. This time the stadium was a 70,000 seater stadium. Baku at the time was a strange destination to host the final, not just because it was a travel nightmare for fans and supporters to get to, but it was also in the midst of conflict with other nations, one of which was Armenia, in which the then Arsenal player Henrik Mkhitaryan feared for his safety and decided against travelling to that country to play in the final, and therefore the Gunners were already down a player before they'd even kicked a ball. But back to the fans' perspective, you only allocated 12,000 tickets to both clubs in a 70,000 seater stadium. In both cases, you gave the majority of tickets to friends, family and corporate sponsors, and it was absolutely disgusting, displaying once again more incompetence, angering fans, clubs and owners. And you can't even pretend that you suddenly care about the fans just because you feared that you may lose your big assets when you have done examples like this in the past. Clearly, overall, you need to change. I'll reiterate this point. You need to change. No one is denying that change doesn't need to happen. It clearly does, whether it's what they oversee or whether it's how these places, associations, organisations are run and so on. But whilst the Super League wasn't the answer, it does prove that complacency from you all had allowed the strong possibility that this could have happened. And football as we know it could have changed forever and been ripped away from the fans. And on one final note, if you all put this much effort into protecting your money, protecting your assets, then we expect the same level of effort for when things like abuse and racism raise their ugly head in our game, and we expect you to combat them in the same type of manner. And with that wraps up this video. It's a slightly more different video, but I feel like it's some things I needed to get out there and get off my chest. But of course, as I always say, these are just the thoughts, comments, opinions of this guy. I want to know what you guys think. What do you make of everything that has happened these past few days? It's been absolutely crazy. What do you make of the points that I've raised in this video? I'd love to know your thoughts, comments, opinions, whatever you want to call it, down in the comment section below. I'm sure they'll all make for interesting reading. Otherwise, hit that like button on the way if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're new or want to see more content like this. Both things will always and probably be greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening. I've been Fletch. This has been another Fletch Talks video. And I will see and speak with you all again soon in another video.